Some people burn bridges when they are fired. I prefer to hand my boss a match and step back to watch him torch his own career. They say never anger the coder, but Julian forgot something far more dangerous. Never cross the only woman holding the physical key to a defense contract worth $500 million. When he called me redundant, he had no idea he just started the countdown to a federal meltdown. Hello, wonderful viewers of Boss Revenge Stories. Because YouTube has recently disabled our channel's monetization, we currently have zero budget to keep this channel operating. If you find today's story entertaining, please consider supporting us with just $1 so our dedicated team can pay their living expenses and continue creating great content for you. You can easily support us by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the donation link in the video description and pinned comment. My name is Adeline Lawson, and I am 34 years old. I worked as an aerospace supply chain compliance expert at Vanguard Aerospace, a massive defense contractor located in the notoriously rainy city of Seattle. If your brain immediately conjures an image of a quiet, nervous auditor wearing a pastel cardigan and hiding behind a mountain of paperwork, you would be dead wrong. I survived in the cutthroat world of military manufacturing by wearing a scuffed leather jacket, drinking black coffee that tasted like pure battery acid, and operating with a mind as cold, calculating, and unforgiving as titanium. My domain was a highly classified digital fortress. I was the sole architect and the only maintainer of a strict protocol we called Aerogate. When you are dealing with the Department of Defense, you do not play fast and loose with data. They demand absolute, unbreakable encryption and flawless tracking for every single microchip, titanium bolt, and navigation board that goes into their fighter jets. Aerogate was the system that encrypted all of that part's data, ensuring Vanguard always met the terrifyingly strict federal standards. I held the keys. I maintained the invisible walls. Because of my unyielding grip on the system, Vanguard had never once failed a federal audit. Then came Julian Vance. Julian was our newly appointed Chief Operating Officer, and he was a walking, breathing tech bro stereotype. He looked like he had just hopped off a venture capitalist yacht in Silicon Valley, always wearing tailored vests and $1,000 sneakers. He did not speak English. He spoke in a relentless stream of meaningless corporate buzzwords. Every meeting with him was a painful barrage of terms like cloudification, lean optimization, disruptive synergy, and agile deployment. To a guy like Julian, anyone who actually understood the grueling, highly regulated mechanics of national security was just a depressing relic of obsolete technology. Whenever he looked at me, I could tell he saw a rotary phone sitting on a desk meant for a modern smartphone. It did not take long for his reign of terror to begin. Julian initiated a brutal company-wide purge under the guise of modernizing our workflow. He systematically fired the veteran engineers, the very people who had spent decades meticulously ensuring that our planes did not fall out of the sky. In their place, he brought in cheap, federally unverified artificial intelligence software. He was obsessed with cutting operational costs by 80% so he could parade around as a visionary genius to the board of directors. I knew the disastrous path he was taking, and I had a legal and moral obligation to warn him. One Tuesday morning, I marched straight into his glass-walled office. "Julian," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level, "you cannot migrate the Aerogate infrastructure entirely to a public cloud. Department of Defense regulations strictly mandate the presence of a physical black box. We must have an on-site server to physically authenticate the supply chain data. It is a strict federal requirement, and it is entirely non-negotiable." Julian leaned back in his ergonomic mesh chair, taking a slow sip from a green detox smoothie. He offered me a profoundly patronizing smile. "Adeline, you are thinking entirely too small," he replied. "The future is in the cloud. Physical servers are dead weight. They are expensive and ugly. You are just trying to use dusty old government regulations to justify keeping your outdated job. We are moving fast and breaking things now. You cannot break federal compliance laws, I warned him calmly. Watch me, he sneered, waving a hand dismissively. Now, if you will excuse me, I have an important sync regarding our new automated procurement interface. I walked out of his office feeling a strange, icy sense of calm. I knew exactly what was coming. When a profoundly arrogant man tells you he is going to break things, you do not throw your body in front of his wrecking ball. You step back and let the flying shrapnel tear him apart. Recognizing the immense legal danger Vanguard was now in, I quietly went into survival mode. Over the next 3 weeks, I meticulously backed up every single compliance protocol. I ensured that the physical server, my black box, was fully configured exactly as the law required, and I printed out hard copies of my warnings to him. I set up the strict federal protocols perfectly, leaving a flawless paper trail of my compliance. I was no longer trying to save my job. I was carefully and silently preparing for my inevitable termination, making absolutely certain that when the federal hammer finally fell, my hands would be spotless. The inevitable execution arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Julian summoned the entire staff to the main auditorium for a mandatory all-hands meeting. He had aggressively branded this massive gathering as the grand unveiling of Vanguard Aerospace's cyberspace era. The stage was rigged with completely unnecessary strobe lights, and a massive LED screen glowed behind him, displaying meaningless, brightly colored graphs, pointing steeply upwards to symbolize infinite financial growth. The auditorium speakers blared an upbeat, royalty-free electronic corporate anthem. Julian bounded onto the stage, gripping a wireless microphone like he was the lead singer of a rock band, wearing a brand new pair of pristine white sneakers that probably cost more than my first car. For 30 agonizing minutes, he subjected us to a dizzying, jargon-filled presentation about how he had successfully streamlined our overhead. He proudly declared that our reliance on cumbersome, expensive physical infrastructure was completely over. According to his beautifully animated slideshow, the cloud was going to magically solve every single logistical problem in the highly regulated aerospace manufacturing pipeline. Then, right in the middle of an impassioned speech about aggressively cutting away the dead weight of the past, he paused dramatically. He looked directly at the fourth row, where I was sitting with my arms crossed over my dark leather jacket. Take Adeline Lawson, for example, Julian announced, his voice echoing loudly through the massive sound system. Hundreds of heads turned to look at me simultaneously. The remaining veteran engineers in the room nervously stared at the floor, absolutely terrified that they would be the next victims of this brutal public execution. Adeline has done a fine job babysitting our old, dusty server systems, Julian continued, pacing across the stage with a smug grin. But with our new fully automated, 100% cloud-based artificial intelligence integration, human oversight for data encryption is officially a thing of the past. The machine does it better, faster, and cheaper. Adeline. As of right now, your position at this company is redundant. The entire auditorium fell completely silent. Publicly firing a senior compliance officer in the middle of a company-wide pep rally was a spectacular new low, even for a delusional tech bro. He expected me to cry. He expected me to scream, to make a dramatic scene, or to desperately beg for my livelihood in front of 500 people. He wanted a display of weakness to cement his absolute dominance over the old guard. Instead, I did absolutely nothing of the sort. I stood up slowly, my expression completely blank and unreadable. I walked calmly down the central aisle, climbed the short carpeted steps up to the stage, and approached him. Julian took a tiny, nervous step back, perhaps expecting a sudden physical altercation. I simply reached into the front pocket of my jacket, pulled out my master flash drive containing all the newly minted cloud passwords, and unclipped my heavy plastic security badge. I set them down gently on the glass podium right in front of him. I understand completely, Julian, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room without the need for a microphone. The cloud passwords and my total administrative access are all right there. I wish you the exact level of success that you truly deserve." Julian puffed out his chest, visibly victorious. He had publicly slain the imaginary dragon of obsolete government compliance. Turning immediately to the facility logistics manager sitting in the front row, he eagerly issued his next brilliant directive. "Now that the physical data bottlenecks are gone, I want the basement server room completely cleared out by 5 o'clock today," Julian commanded. "Strip it down to the bare concrete walls. We are going to repurpose that gloomy, wasted space into a wellness lounge for the staff. Put in a premium kombucha bar, a couple of expensive ping-pong tables, and maybe some ergonomic beanbag chairs. I want those useless black server towers hauled off to the private electronics scrapyard immediately." An hour later, I was standing quietly in the expansive marble-floored lobby of Vanguard Aerospace, holding a small cardboard box containing my personal coffee mug and a few desk plants. I did not leave the building immediately. I waited patiently by the large glass revolving doors, watching intently as the private waste disposal contractors wheeled a heavy-duty industrial dolly out of the main service elevator. Strapped securely to the dolly was my black box. It was a heavy matte black server unit, built with military-grade reinforced casing and tamper-proof physical locks. It looked like a vital component pulled straight out of a nuclear submarine. Yet these contractors were treating it like a broken, worthless office printer, roughly dragging it across the polished floor toward their loading truck. I stepped directly into their path, blocking the exit. "Excuse me," I said to the lead contractor, pulling a crisp, standardized corporate document from my clipboard. "Before you load that specific piece of hardware onto your transport truck, I need you to sign this document." The man wiped sweat from his forehead, looking annoyed at the sudden delay. "What is it?" he asked gruffly. "It is a standard asset disposal by Chief Operating Officer order form," I replied smoothly, pointing to the designated signature line. "It simply states that you are permanently removing this specific hardware serial number from the premises under the direct, explicit instructions of Julian Vance, and that it is being legally reclassified as private electronic scrap. It is just a basic liability release to protect your disposal company." The contractor shrugged, completely indifferent to corporate bureaucracy. He pulled a cheap blue pen from behind his ear, quickly scribbled his signature on the dotted line, and handed the clipboard back to me. "Thanks, lady," he muttered, shoving the heavy dolly through the automatic doors and out into the loading dock. I carefully folded the signed document and slipped it into the inside pocket of my jacket. The heavy glass doors slid open for me, and I finally stepped out into the familiar light misty rain of a Seattle afternoon. I took a deep breath of the damp air, letting a genuine, icy smile spread across my face. Julian Vance truly believed he had just thrown away an old, redundant computer to make room for his hipster beverages. He was completely unaware of the terrifying reality of federal defense contracting. That heavy black server was not just a standard storage device. It was the root authentication node for the Pentagon. It was the only physical piece of hardware in the entire state of Washington legally capable of verifying the security hashes for Vanguard's military contracts. Without that specific node, every single microchip, every single line of code, and every single titanium component Vanguard produced would be instantly classified as unverified and completely illegal for military use. By tossing it into a scrap truck, Julian had not just fired me. He had just confidently locked the front door of a $500 million company and thrown the only key straight into the city dump. 4 months drifted by in a state of absolute blissful ignorance for the new leadership at Vanguard Aerospace. Julian Vance was riding the crest of a massive corporate wave. His aggressive cost-cutting measures and flashy technological pivots had seemingly paid off in a spectacular fashion. Vanguard had just secured a monumental new military contract to manufacture highly classified, next-generation guidance components for a fleet of defense missiles. The total value of this new endeavor was a staggering $500 million. Almost overnight, Julian became the golden boy of the defense technology sector. He was featured prominently on the glossy cover of a premier national business magazine. The cover photo showed him standing with his arms crossed confidently in front of a massive, sleek jet turbine, wearing his signature custom-tailored vest. The bold headline beneath his expensive shoes proudly labeled him as a fearless disruptor who was finally breaking down the archaic barriers of aerospace manufacturing. He spent his evenings hosting lavish rooftop celebration parties, loudly crediting his own brilliant decision to move everything to the cloud for their newfound financial triumph. While Julian was busy popping champagne and basking in the glow of his magazine features, I was miles away, completely removed from the toxic corporate environment. I had rented a quiet, isolated wooden cabin nestled deep within the dense pine forests of the Cascade Mountains. My daily routine was beautifully simple and entirely stress-free. I spent my mornings hiking through the rugged mountain trails, breathing in the crisp, cold air, and enjoying expensive loose-leaf tea on my front porch. However, I was not entirely disconnected from the business world. Between those long, peaceful walks, I was quietly and methodically laying the legal groundwork for my own independent venture. I had formally registered a small, private, limited liability company. It was a boutique tech consulting firm, completely legally sound, and entirely off the radar of the arrogant executives back in Seattle. I was simply biding my time, waiting patiently for the inevitable physics of federal bureaucracy to take their natural course. Back at the Vanguard headquarters, the invisible countdown timer I had left behind finally reached its critical threshold. The Department of Defense does not operate on corporate hype, and they are entirely unimpressed by flashy magazine covers or venture capitalist buzzwords. Their automated security oversight matrix flagged a massive structural discrepancy in Vanguard's newly digitized reporting methods. Consequently, the federal government issued an official, legally binding notification for a snap federal audit. This was not a friendly, routine quarterly review where corporate executives could schmooze inspectors over expensive catered lunches. A snap audit was a high-stakes, zero-notice tactical strike designed to ruthlessly test a defense contractor's operational integrity and legal compliance. When the severe government notification arrived in Julian's inbox, he did not experience a single ounce of panic. In fact, his monumental arrogance only swelled further. He viewed this intense federal scrutiny not as a dire threat, but as a glorious, highly publicized opportunity to showcase his modernized empire to the government elite. He immediately gathered his newly hired team of young, inexperienced IT directors. These were individuals who thoroughly understood consumer software, but had absolutely no comprehension of the sheer, unforgiving gravity of military security protocols. Instead of frantically reviewing the strict, legally mandated compliance codes, they spent their crucial preparation hours designing stunning, highly interactive data visualization charts on their sleek tablet devices. They genuinely believed they could easily dazzle federal defense auditors with colorful pie charts, smooth animations, and impressive metrics showing exactly how much operational budget they had saved by eliminating physical server maintenance. During one of these chaotic preparation meetings, a senior manager nervously raised a hand. "Julian, regarding the old federal compliance protocols," the manager stammered cautiously, "should we perhaps reach out to Adeline Lawson, just to ensure our new cloud transition did not accidentally violate any of her previous physical security structures?" Julian slammed his hand down on the glass conference table, instantly silencing the room. "I am implementing a strict company-wide ban on that woman's name," Julian ordered, his voice dripping with absolute contempt. Her old warnings were nothing more than the pathetic, desperate scare tactics of an obsolete employee who lacked the vision to adapt to the future. "Our cloud infrastructure is flawless. When those auditors see our new dashboard, they will be begging us to help them modernize the entire Pentagon. But the United States military does not care about beautiful dashboards or modern corporate vision. They care about hard, undeniable, mathematically perfect cryptography." At exactly midnight, just hours before the federal auditors were scheduled to walk through Vanguard's front doors. The Department of Defense servers quietly executed a routine, automated pre-audit security sweep. A highly classified, silent string of code was deployed directly from a heavily guarded server room in Virginia. Its sole purpose was to digitally reach across the country, penetrate the Vanguard network, and complete a digital handshake with the authorized physical hardware to cryptographically verify the integrity of the $500 million supply chain. The code traveled silently through the fiber optic cables, completely ignoring Julian's flashy new cloud interfaces. It searched specifically for the unique hardware signature of the heavy black server unit, sending out a mandatory security ping and waiting for the designated physical node to respond. Deep within the automated federal logs, a single chilling error message quietly recorded the reality of the situation. Connection failed. Node missing. The bomb had officially been armed, and Julian Vance was fast asleep, entirely unaware that his entire world was about to be instantly vaporized. Promptly at 8 o'clock on a gray Monday morning, the reality of federal oversight finally descended upon Vanguard Aerospace. Julian Vance had spent the entire weekend orchestrating a meticulously curated welcome reception in the main lobby. He had ordered an extravagant spread of artisanal pastries, expensive imported coffees, and fresh fruit arrangements. His newly hired executive team stood in a neat, nervously smiling row, dressed in designer suits, ready to charm a group of elderly government bureaucrats with their cutting-edge vision of aerospace manufacturing. They expected polite handshakes and boring clipboard checklists. They did not expect a synchronized tactical convoy. 3 heavy black government utility vehicles pulled up to the front entrance, their tires screeching slightly on the damp pavement. The doors swung open simultaneously, but the people who stepped out were not wearing tailored business suits. They were a team of hardened federal investigators, wearing dark, heavy-duty tactical windbreakers, prominently displaying the bold yellow acronyms of the United States Department of Defense and the Federal Aviation Administration. There was no casual chatter. There were no friendly waves. They moved with the terrifying, synchronized precision of an elite military unit securing a hostile perimeter. Leading the formation was Special Agent Marcus. He was a tall, incredibly imposing man with a face carved from solid granite and eyes that looked like they had spent decades dissecting corporate fraud. He possessed an aura of absolute, uncompromising authority that instantly sucked all the oxygen out of the lavishly decorated lobby. Julian, masking his sudden wave of intimidation with a broad, overly enthusiastic smile, stepped forward and extended his hand. "Welcome to Vanguard Aerospace, gentlemen," Julian greeted, his voice noticeably higher than usual. "We have prepared a wonderful breakfast reception for your team right over here. I would love to walk you through our new corporate synergy timeline before we begin." Special Agent Marcus did not take Julian's extended hand. He simply stared at it for a long, uncomfortable moment until Julian awkwardly lowered it back to his side. "We are not here for a breakfast buffet, Mr. Vance," Special Agent Marcus stated, his voice a deep, resonant rumble that offered absolutely no warmth. "We are conducting a snap federal audit regarding the structural integrity of a $500 million national defense contract. You will immediately escort my team to your primary data control room. If you attempt to delay our access or offer us another pastry, I will place you under federal arrest for obstructing an active Department of Defense investigation. Do I make myself perfectly clear?" The blood completely drained from Julian's face. The smug, visionary tech bro persona evaporated instantly, replaced by the trembling reality of a man who suddenly realized he was swimming with a great white shark. He offered a frantic, silent nod and immediately pivoted on his expensive sneakers, leading the terrifying procession of federal agents away from the untouched breakfast spread and toward the executive elevators. Julian led them into a sleek, brightly lit command center that he had recently renovated. It was filled with ergonomic glass desks, massive curved monitors, and a team of young IT professionals nervously typing on their mechanical keyboards. Julian rushed over to the main control terminal, desperately trying to regain his composure. He snatched up a perfectly polished tablet device, his fingers gliding across the smooth glass to pull up the gorgeous, highly animated cloud dashboard his team had spent all weekend designing. "Agent Marcus, I am thrilled to show you our modernized infrastructure," Julian stammered, forcing a proud smile as he handed the sleek tablet toward the towering investigator. "As you can see right here on this interactive interface, we have completely migrated our entire supply chain oversight to a state-of-the-art, fully encrypted public cloud environment. It is agile, it is lean, and it offers unprecedented real-time analytics." This was the moment the first devastating blow landed. Special Agent Marcus did not even bother looking at the glowing screen. He raised a heavy hand and forcefully pushed the tablet aside, treating the expensive device like a piece of annoying trash. "I do not care about your colorful little tablet, Mr. Vance," Marcus said coldly, his tone dripping with absolute disdain. "Cloud data is inherently mutable. Under federal law, external cloud data possesses exactly zero legal validity in matters of national security unless it is simultaneously, cryptographically signed and authenticated by an isolated, on-site physical root node. We require the physical hardware logs to verify the integrity of the data you are hosting on your third-party servers. We need to physically interface with your local black box immediately." Julian blinked, a wave of profound confusion washing over him. "Physical hardware? Agent Marcus, I assure you, our cloud provider has the highest level of commercial security. We eliminated all of our heavy, outdated physical servers months ago to optimize our operational footprint." Special Agent Marcus stopped dead in his tracks. The silence in the room became so heavy it felt physically crushing. The other federal agents immediately placed their hands near their utility belts, their postures shifting from investigative to highly aggressive. "You eliminated the physical servers?" Marcus repeated, speaking incredibly slowly, as if addressing a dangerously stupid child. "Mr. Vance, the United States military requires a localized federal hash lock to authorize the production of missile components. Attempting to bypass that physical lock is not an optimization. It is a severe violation of the Espionage Act." "There must be a digital workaround," Julian gasped, his voice cracking as sheer panic finally took hold. He spun around to his young IT director. "Pull up the contract details. Force a manual override into the defense portal right now. Show them the data." The IT team frantically hammered away at their keyboards. Sweat poured down their faces as they launched every administrative protocol they possessed. They desperately tried to open the encrypted files containing the schematics and supply chain history for the $500 million contract. The main massive wall monitor flashed brightly as the system attempted to fetch the secure data from the cloud. Suddenly, the entire network froze. The beautifully animated dashboard vanished entirely. In its place, a massive, glaring red notification box violently hijacked every single screen in the room, accompanied by a harsh, grating electronic warning siren. The words displayed were not written in friendly corporate language. They were a brutal, uncompromising digital dead-end programmed directly by the Pentagon. "Access denied. Severe compliance breach detected. All federal defense data locked. Physical connection required with node number 884 Alpha to unlock." The young IT director slowly pushed his chair back from the desk, his hands shaking violently. He looked up at Julian with wide, terrified eyes. Julian stared at the glaring red text on the massive screen. "Node number 884 Alpha." The breath caught in his throat. His perfectly styled hair suddenly seemed unkempt, his expensive clothes feeling like a suffocating straitjacket. He recognized that specific hardware designation. It was the exact serial number printed on the heavy, matte black server unit he had ordered me to leave behind. It was the exact same piece of equipment he had smugly instructed the scrapyard contractors to haul away as garbage, just so he could knock down a wall and build a premium kombucha bar and a ping-pong lounge for his employees. The devastating reality hit him with the force of a freight train. He was standing in front of the federal government, completely locked out of his own company, entirely because of his own arrogant, redundant move. The terrifying silence in the command center was finally broken by the heavy, rhythmic thud of Special Agent Marcus stepping closer to the massive screen flashing its red warning. He did not yell. He did not need to. His voice was a low, dangerous growl that commanded absolute obedience. "Mr. Vance," Marcus said, turning his cold gaze back to the trembling executive, "you have exactly 4 hours to locate node number 884 Alpha, transport it back to this facility, and physically reconnect it to this network. If that authentication server is not fully operational by noon today, I am legally obligated to initiate a full tactical lockdown of this entire manufacturing plant. We will immediately terminate the $500 million contract, freeze all of your corporate assets, and launch a federal investigation into Vanguard Aerospace for the unauthorized disposal and potential leak of highly classified military data." Julian's jaw practically unhinged. 4 hours? Agent Marcus, please, you have to give us more time. The facility logistics team handled the server migration 4 months ago. We need to trace the hardware. Marcus checked his heavy steel wristwatch, completely unmoved by the display of desperation. "You now have 3 hours and 59 minutes. I suggest you start digging." What followed was a display of corporate panic so pathetic it bordered on high comedy. The sleek, modern, cloud-optimized headquarters of Vanguard Aerospace descended into absolute primitive chaos. Julian sprinted out of the control room, his expensive leather shoes slipping on the polished marble floors. He screamed at his executive assistants, bellowing at the top of his lungs for the head of the legal department and the facility manager to meet him in his glass-walled office immediately. The once quiet, zen-like workspace was now filled with the frantic sounds of tearing paper, slamming filing cabinet drawers, and executives shouting at each other in sheer terror. Julian paced behind his desk like a trapped animal, sweating profusely through his designer shirt. The head of legal, a pale man who looked like he was on the verge of a massive heart attack, rushed into the room clutching a single, slightly wrinkled sheet of paper. "Julian, we found the disposal logs from the day you cleared out the basement," the lawyer gasped, tossing the paper onto the glass desk. Julian practically dove across the desk to grab it. His eyes darted frantically across the text. It was the standard asset disposal by Chief Operating Officer order form. Right there at the bottom, sitting mocking him in cheap blue ink, was the signature of the scrapyard contractor. But what made Julian's stomach drop into a bottomless pit was the attached authorization memo. It clearly stated that the heavy black server, specifically labeled as a piece of obsolete, non-essential hardware, was to be permanently removed and legally reclassified as private electronic scrap. And right below that catastrophic instruction was Julian's own bold, confident signature, authorizing the entire suicidal maneuver just so he could install a kombucha bar. "Where did they take it?" Julian shrieked, his voice cracking into a high-pitched squeal. "Find the address of the disposal company. Call my private security team. Get my car." 20 minutes later, a fleet of sleek black corporate SUVs tore out of the Vanguard parking lot, recklessly breaking every single speed limit as they barreled toward the industrial outskirts of Seattle. Julian sat in the back of the lead vehicle, chewing his fingernails down to the quick, muttering desperate prayers to whatever Silicon Valley deity would listen. They arrived at a sprawling, muddy scrapyard, surrounded by high chain-link fences, topped with razor wire. It was a chaotic graveyard of rusted washing machines, stripped copper wire, and mountains of obsolete office electronics. Julian kicked open the door of his luxury SUV before it even fully stopped. Accompanied by 3 burly security guards in dark suits, he frantically trudged through the thick, oily mud, ruining his $1,000 sneakers with every panicked step. They burst into the small, grimy aluminum trailer that served as the scrapyard office. The manager, a large man wearing grease-stained overalls and chewing loudly on a piece of bright pink bubblegum, barely looked up from his old, dusty computer monitor. "We need a server," Julian gasped, slamming his hands down on the manager's cluttered desk, gasping for air. "A heavy black server tower, serial number 884 Alpha. We contracted your company to pick it up 4 months ago from Vanguard Aerospace. I will pay you double whatever it is worth right now." The manager slowly stopped chewing his gum. He looked at the frantic, mud-splattered executive, then let out a raspy, dismissive chuckle. "Buddy, you are about 4 months too late," the manager drawled lazily. "We process thousands of pounds of junk here every single week. When that Vanguard load came in, it was properly documented as private electronic scrap, totally cleared of corporate ownership. We held a public liquidation auction that exact same afternoon." Julian felt the room spin. The edges of his vision began to blur. "Sold?" Julian choked out, leaning heavily against the flimsy desk to keep from collapsing. "You sold a military authentication node at a scrap auction? Who bought it? You must have a record. I will buy it back from them for anything they want." The manager sighed loudly, annoyed by the hysterical man ruining his morning. He reached into a filing drawer, pulled out a thick, battered paper ledger, and licked his thumb. He slowly flipped back through hundreds of pages, his dirty fingernail tracing down a column of dates from 4 months prior. "Let us see here," the manager muttered. Yep, here is your load. Vanguard Aerospace. The whole lot of heavy servers, including that black one, was purchased by a private buyer in a single lot." "Give me the name," Julian demanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of hope and utter terror. The manager squinted at the messy handwriting in the ledger. "Looks like it was sold to a private consulting firm, a limited liability company registered right here in Washington," the manager read aloud. "Name of the buyer is Lawson Tech Reclamation, LLC." The silence that fell over the dusty trailer was absolute. Julian Vance turned completely rigid, as if a sudden blast of liquid nitrogen had frozen him from the inside out. Lawson. His mind violently snapped back to the auditorium 4 months ago. The calm, unreadable expression of the woman he had publicly humiliated. The woman he had gleefully called redundant. Adeline Lawson. The horrific realization finally crashed down upon him, crushing whatever remained of his ego into fine dust. He had not just recklessly thrown away the company's data. By signing that disposal form, he had legally and willingly handed the absolute physical control of a $500 million national security defense contract directly to the exceptionally brilliant, ruthlessly cold woman he had just fired. The desperate scramble was over. The trap had flawlessly snapped shut. The desperate race back from the muddy scrapyard to the Vanguard Aerospace headquarters was a blur of hyperventilating and shattered illusions for Julian Vance. By the time his ruined, mud-caked luxury sneakers stepped back onto the pristine marble floor of the data control room, the clock on the wall had already struck exactly 12 noon. The 4-hour window of grace had completely slammed shut. Special Agent Marcus stood exactly where they had left him, a towering monolith of federal authority. He did not ask if Julian had found the hardware. One look at the terrified, trembling executive was all the confirmation he needed. Marcus raised his massive hand and slammed it down onto the glass conference table with a deafening crack that made every single information technology technician in the room violently flinch. "Time is up," Special Agent Marcus declared, his voice echoing with absolute, uncompromising finality. "Vanguard Aerospace has officially failed this snap audit. I am hereby declaring a total suspension of all manufacturing operations at this facility, effective immediately." Right on cue, the heavy doors of the control room swung open, and a dozen federal agents wearing crisp windbreakers with the letters of the Federal Bureau of Investigation printed in bold yellow across their backs marched into the room. They carried heavy plastic storage bins and rolls of bright red, tamper-evident federal tape. They immediately began unspooling the tape, aggressively sealing the sleek cloud dashboard monitors, locking down the glass filing cabinets, and completely blocking the doors leading down to the basement where the kombucha bar was currently under construction. "You cannot do this," Julian whispered, collapsing into an ergonomic mesh chair, clutching his head as he watched his entire corporate empire crumble in real time. "The $500 million contract. We are innovators. There has to be a modern solution." In the middle of this absolute terrifying chaos, a sharp, upbeat ringtone pierced the heavy air. It was Julian's personal cell phone, resting on the glass table directly next to Special Agent Marcus. The caller ID boldly displayed a name that made Julian's blood freeze solid in his veins. Adeline Lawson. Julian lunged for the phone with the desperate, flailing speed of a drowning man grabbing a life preserver. He swiped the screen to answer, his hands shaking so violently that he accidentally pressed the speakerphone button, broadcasting the call to the entire silent, heavily guarded room. "Adeline!" Julian screamed, his voice a hysterical, unhinged shriek of pure desperation. "You stole it! You stole the physical black box! I am going to sue you into absolute oblivion. I am having you arrested right now for corporate espionage and federal theft. You bring that server back to this building right this exact second." From the small speaker of the phone, a soft, incredibly relaxed sigh echoed through the tense room. In the background, beneath the crisp, clear audio of her voice, everyone could clearly hear the rhythmic, peaceful sound of ocean waves gently crashing against a distant shoreline. "Julian, I strongly suggest you lower your voice and listen to me very carefully," I said, taking a slow, leisurely sip of my coffee before continuing. "I did not steal absolutely anything from Vanguard Aerospace. 4 months ago, you explicitly and legally ordered the disposal of that specific piece of hardware. You physically signed a binding corporate authorization form, completely reclassifying it as private electronic scrap. You threw it away. I simply attended a public scrap auction and purchased a pallet of junk with my own legally acquired funds." Julian gasped for air, his face turning a dangerous, suffocating shade of purple. "It has top-secret military authentication codes on it. You cannot just buy that at a civilian scrapyard." "Actually, Julian, I can," I replied smoothly, the sweet satisfaction radiating through every single syllable. "I highly suggest you consult your brilliant legal team regarding the Department of Defense Civilian Asset Recovery provision. If a defense contractor is dangerously negligent enough to willfully discard classified security equipment, any United States citizen who legally purchases it at a public venue assumes complete legal ownership of that physical hardware. In fact, the federal government actively encourages and rewards citizens who secure abandoned national security assets before they fall into foreign hands. I did not steal your server, Julian. I legally rescued a vital national asset from your gross, unbelievable incompetence." Julian was completely speechless. His mouth opened and closed silently like a suffocating fish pulled straight out of the water. Right now, that physical node is sitting safely inside a climate-controlled, federally approved, maximum security bank vault, I continued, my tone shifting to crisp, professional business negotiation. "Since my private consulting firm, Lawson Tech Reclamation, currently owns the only physical hardware capable of saving your $500 million contract, I am willing to lease the equipment back to Vanguard. This will be an emergency, non-negotiable consulting agreement. My fee for this specialized service is exactly 20% of the total contract value. That comes out to exactly $100 million, payable immediately upon signature. My lawyers have already drafted the airtight paperwork." $100 million? Julian shrieked, tears of sheer panic finally spilling down his pale cheeks. "That is extortion. That is totally illegal. Agent Marcus is standing right here, Adeline. The federal government is listening to every single word you are saying." "I know," I said calmly, leaning back in my patio chair. "Put him on." Julian looked up at Special Agent Marcus with pleading, desperate eyes, fully expecting the towering man to unleash the full, terrifying fury of the United States government upon the woman on the phone. Marcus reached down and firmly snatched the device from Julian's trembling hand. "Ms. Lawson, this is Special Agent Marcus. the formidable man rumbled, his rigid posture shifting ever so slightly into something resembling respect. Julian held his breath, desperately waiting for the federal arrest warrant to be aggressively issued over the phone. Instead, Special Agent Marcus let out a long, heavy exhale. "Ms. Lawson, my team has thoroughly verified your federal compliance record. You maintained a flawless security matrix at this facility for years. On behalf of the Department of Defense, I want to formally thank you for securely retaining this critical national asset and keeping it far out of the hands of dangerous, arrogant amateurs. Your leasing terms are a private civil matter, but from a federal security standpoint, you are fully cleared and highly commended." Julian Vance let out a pathetic, broken whimper as the devastating reality of the checkmate finally settled in. There were absolutely no legal loopholes. There was no escape. The glorious, automated cloud could not save him now. Marcus casually dropped the phone back onto the desk in front of a completely broken Julian. "Take him," Marcus coldly ordered the federal agents. Two large agents instantly grabbed Julian by the arms, forcefully hauling him out of the expensive ergonomic chair. The cold, heavy steel of federal handcuffs clicked sharply and securely around his wrists. As they dragged him across the command center toward the elevator, loudly reading him his legal rights for violating the Defense Resources Sabotage Act, Julian could only stare blankly at his muddy, ruined sneakers. His entire illustrious career, his wealth and his freedom had just been completely incinerated by a woman he had severely underestimated. Hundreds of miles away, standing on the sunlit balcony of my private beachside cabin, I reached over and tapped the red button to end the call. I took another deep, incredibly satisfying sip of my freshly brewed black coffee, enjoying the gentle ocean breeze against my face. My tablet screen suddenly lit up with a secure notification from my legal team, officially confirming the initial escrow deposit for the $100 million emergency lease agreement. I smiled warmly, looking out at the beautiful, endless horizon. Who says being redundant cannot be immensely profitable? Hello, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's story. We truly appreciate your continued support, and we would absolutely love to know where you are listening from today, so please let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want to help our channel survive, please consider supporting us with just $1. You can easily do this by scanning the QR code currently on your screen, or by clicking the donation link located in the video description and the pinned comment. Your incredible generosity allows us to pay our dedicated team, helping them provide for their families so we can continue creating even more amazing stories for you to enjoy. Thank you again, and have a truly wonderful day.